Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Brooke's voice pierced the silence, gentle but heavy, like the first sound of thunder before a storm. Ridge, I've been carrying this too long. I can't keep it from you any longer. Her words were deliberate and carefully selected, yet they held the weight of a long-buried truth. Before returning to Ridge, she cast a pity-filled look at Thomas. This is about Thomas. What happened all those years ago? Thomas froze, his breath caught in his throat. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as his mind tried to figure out what she was saying. His past was a tapestry of blunders, woven with strands of impulsiveness and remorse, but nothing stood out more than the fear that was holding his heart right now. He wanted to speak, to interrupt, but his voice was stifled by the fear that was building in his chest. Ridge's brow furrowed, and his hands tightened at his sides. What are you talking about, Brooke? What about Thomas? His tone was stern and protective, a father's instinct kicking in before he even realized the conflict he was in. Brooke stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Ridge's. Years ago, on the night of the gala, Thomas was struggling. When he was lost. Her voice shook, but she pressed on, as if the truth needed to be said, no matter the cost. Ridge, I discovered him that night. He was in a dark place, wallowing in guilt for what he'd done to Caroline, Hope, and everyone. I tried to help him, but he was drinking and spiraling. Thomas's knees buckled, and he grasped the doorframe to stay firm. Memories of that night came flooding back, fractured and fuzzy, like a dream he had wanted to forget. The gala, the champagne, and the weight of his mistakes weighed heavily on him till he couldn't breathe. And Brooke had been there, her voice soothing, her presence a lifeline he had not earned. But what was she going to say? What truth was she revealing that he couldn't recall? Can you help him? Ridge's voice raised with incredulity and wrath. Brooke, what have you done? What are you saying? She swallowed hard, tears running down her cheeks. I wasn't sure how to tell you, Ridge. I did not intend to hurt you. That night, Thomas was broken, and I crossed a line. I kissed him. The words hit like a bomb, shattering the fragile serenity in the room. Ridge staggered back, his face pale, as if the air had been pulled from his lungs. Thomas let out a choking sob, his palm leaping to his mouth as the memory came into focus. It had not been a dream. It had not been his imagination. Brooke's lips on his were quick and fleeting, a moment of weakness caused by his sorrow and her compassion. He'd buried it so deeply that he convinced himself it never happened. But it did. And now it was ripping them apart. Did you kiss my son? Ridge's voice was low and deadly, each syllable tinged with betrayal. Did you kiss Thomas? My son? Brooke's hand shot up, as if to protect herself from the allegation. It was not like that, Ridge. It wasn't intended. It was a mistake. A moment of weakness. I was attempting to console him, but it went too far. I've regretted it every day since. Thomas's chest heaved with shame, and his tears flowed freely. Dad, His voice broke, and he shook his head, unable to find the words. I did not intend for it to happen. I was a disaster. I was intoxicated and lost, and Brooke was simply trying to help me. It was my fault. Ridge turned on him, his eyes filled with rage that Thomas had never seen aimed at him before. Is it your fault? Did you let this happen? You let my wife to cross that line with you? He took a stride toward Thomas, his fists clenched, and for a brief moment, Thomas feared his father would attack him. Ridge paused, his shoulders slumping as rage gave way to something worse. Disappointment. Ridge, please, Brooke pleaded, her voice rough. It was just one error. I've been carrying the guilt of that for years. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to ruin our family. I did not want to hurt you or Thomas. Hurt me? Ridge's laugh was harsh and hollow. Do you think this doesn't hurt? Do you think standing here, hearing that my wife and kid have betrayed me, does not rip me apart? He turned away, running his fingers through his hair with his back to both of them. I trusted you, Brooke. I trusted you with my heart and my family. And you. He couldn't finish, the pain too acute to express. Thomas collapsed to the floor, his knees giving out entirely. He hid his face in his hands, sobbing uncontrollably. "I apologize, Dad. I'm so sorry. I did not want this. I did not mean to hurt you." His words were muted and weak, but they bore the weight of his regret. He'd spent years trying to rebuild himself, to show that he was more than his faults, but this was a wound he couldn't cure. Not for his father, Brooke, or for himself. Brooke knelt beside him, her hand lingering over his shoulder before pulling it back, as if she was worried her touch would aggravate the situation. "Thomas, it's not your fault. I was the person who should have known better." "I should have stopped it," Thomas said, shaking his head, his words barely audible. "I should have stopped it. I should have gone away. I knew you were trying to help, but I let it happen." He glanced up at her, his eyes red and puffy. "Why haven't you told me? Why didn't you allow me to carry this with you?" Brooke's lips quiver, and her tears mirrored his. "I wanted to protect you. You were already broken, Thomas. I couldn't add to your load." Ridge turned back to face them, his demeanor opaque, a tempest of emotions churning in his eyes. "Protect him? How about me, Brooke? What about us? Did you ever consider what this would do to me?" His voice broke, and Thomas realized for the first time how deep his father's pain was, not just anger, but a bone-deep hurt that pierced through the years of love and trust they'd created. "I thought about it every day," Brooke said softly. "Every time I looked at you, every time we laughed together, and every time we discussed our future. I couldn't face the notion of this destroying you. So I kept it inside, thinking that it would remain buried. But it did not. It never does." The room grew silent again, the weight of her revelation hanging over them like a veil. Ridge's eyes wandered between Brooke and Thomas, as if he was looking for a way to make sense of the betrayal and move forward. But there was no simple remedy, no words that could reverse what had happened. Thomas climbed unsteadily to his feet, his hands shaking as he brushed away tears. "Dad, I will leave. If you need me to go, I will do so. I do not want to be the reason you and Brooke break up." Ridge stiffened his jaw, but did not answer right away. When he eventually spoke, his tone was calmer and more resigned. "You are my son, Thomas. I do not want you to depart. But I'm not sure how to look at you right now. I don't know how to look at either of you." Brooke reached for him, brushing her fingers against his arm, but he yanked away, the rejection harsh and definitive. "Don't, Brooke. Not now. I need time." He turned and moved toward the door, his steps heavy with the weight of their divided family. "Ridge, please," Brooke called after him, her voice breaking. "Do not walk away. This is something we can fix. We can work it out," Ridge said, but he would not back down. The door closed softly behind him, leaving Brooke and Thomas alone in the oppressive silence. Thomas's sobbing had subsided, but the anguish in his chest remained constant, a raw, excruciating wound that no apology could heal. He looked at Brooke, hoping for forgiveness, understanding, or anything, but all he saw was her anguish, which mirrored his own. "I'm sorry," he said again, his words feeling insufficient and meaningless. "I'm so sorry." Brooke nodded, her tears pouring faster. "So am I, Thomas. So am I." Outside, the wind increased up, blowing the fallen leaves across the lawn. Their transient beauty vanished in the approaching storm. Inside, the Forrester home stood as a quiet witness to a family torn apart by a single moment, a single mistake, and the awful weight of reality. The days that followed were a flurry of awkward silences and avoided stares. Ridge glided about the home like a ghost, his presence a reminder of the rift that had formed between them. Brooke attempted to reach him, leaving messages, texting him, screaming for a chance to chat, but he stayed distant, his heart guarded by the walls he'd created to shield himself from additional anguish. Thomas, however, withdrew into himself, plagued by the events of that night and his involvement in breaking his father's confidence. He spent hours in his workshop drawing concepts that never saw the light of day, each line an ineffective attempt to divert himself from the guilt that gnawed at him. He considered leaving, starting over somewhere fresh, but the notion of abandoning his family, his kid, sister, and father, kept him anchored to Los Angeles, to the life he'd worked so hard to restore. Brooke, too, was lost in her own regret. She replayed that night over and over, questioning every decision, word, and situation that led up to that kiss. She intended to save Thomas, to bring him back from the edge, but instead she pushed them all into the abyss. She worried if Ridge would ever forgive her, if they would ever be able to rekindle the love that had defined their lives. Brooke discovered Thomas lounging on the terrace one evening as the sun slipped below the horizon, illuminating the estate in a beautiful, golden glow. She hesitated, then sat next to him, the quiet between them heavy but not harsh. "I keep thinking about what I could have done differently," Thomas replied, his voice barely audible in the twilight breeze. "If I'd just walked away that night, if I'd been stronger, none of this would have happened." Brooke shook her head, her gaze locked on the sky. "Thomas, you can't carry that alone. I made the decision. I was the one who should have known better." He turned to her, his face raw and vulnerable. "But, Brooke, I let it happen. I let you and Dad down. I'm not sure how to remedy it." She reached for his hand this time, and he didn't back away. "We can't fix it," she said gently. "Not in the way we would like to. However, we can strive to move forward. We can endeavor to be honest and better. For Ridge, for us, and for our family." Thomas nodded, but her words did not alleviate his burden. "Do you believe he will ever forgive us?" Brooke's gaze went to the faint but persistent stars that were beginning to shine in the sky. "I don't know," she said. "But I need to think he will. What's the point if he doesn't do it?" They sat there in quiet, two damaged souls united by a common mistake, looking for a way to mend the wounds they'd caused. The city shone below, oblivious to their anguish, and the night dragged on, bearing the fragile hope that time would heal what words could not. Weeks slipped into months, and the Forestos hobbled along, each dealing with their own version of the truth. Ridge began to soften, his fury giving way to a weary acceptance, but his trust in Brooke and Thomas remained shattered. They attended family dinners and spoke courteous words, but the warmth that had previously marked their relationship was vanished, replaced by a cautious distancing. Thomas immersed himself into his craft, turning his pain into creations that were more detailed and passionate than the last one. He found peace in his sketches' lines and curves, as well as the quiet periods when he could bury himself in his work. Even that wasn't enough to silence the voice in his head that told him he'd never be free of his past. Brooke, meantime, worked hard to repair her connection with Ridge, attending therapy sessions, penning letters she never sent, and believing that love could triumph over even the most profound betrayal. She missed the man who previously looked at her as if she were his entire universe, and she swore to do whatever it took to reclaim that gaze. As spring blossomed over Los Angeles, Ridge summoned Brooke and Thomas to the house. They stood in the same living room where the truth had been disclosed, the air as oppressive as it had been months earlier. Ridge appeared older and exhausted, yet there was a gentleness in his eyes that had never been there before. "I've been thinking a lot," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "About us, our family, and what we mean to one another. I won't lie, it's been difficult. It was harder than anything I'd ever experienced. But I do not want to lose you. Either of you." Brooke's breath hitched, and for the first time in months, she felt hope in her chest. Thomas's eyes widened, and his heart raced with relief and anxiety. "I'm not saying I'm over it," Ridge added, shifting his eyes between them. "I am not suggesting I can forget what happened. But I want to try. I want to be a family again. Because, despite everything, I love you both." Brooke's eyes welled up, and she reached for Ridge's hand, relieved that he did not draw away. Thomas took a hesitant step forwards, his voice wavering. "Dad, I'm not sure what to say. I just want you to know that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make things right." Ridge nodded, his eyes softening more. "That is all I can ask, son. That's all any of us could do." The road ahead was uncertain, filled with the shards of their broken trust, but for the first time in months, there was a ray of optimism. They weren't whole quite yet, But they were together, which was a start. The Forrester family, bruised but unbroken, began the first steps toward mending, knowing that love, while delicate, was stronger than the faults that had attempted to break them apart. "Ridge," she began, her voice low and nearly breaking, "there's something you need to know, something I should have told you sooner." He stared at her with a tiredness that came from years of carrying too many heartbreaks. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing, just waited, knowing that what she was about to disclose would change everything. Her eyes wet, but she pushed back tears, hoping to keep herself together long enough to finish. "It's about Thomas," she explained finally. The name itself seemed to resonate throughout the room, and above, as if fate had conspired, Thomas himself stood in the corridor, unseen by either of them, his breath caught in his mouth as he realized the talk was about himself. "I didn't want to accept it at first," Brooke explained, her hands twisting anxiously together, "but I discovered the truth. Ridge, Hope's manipulations and lies were not solely motivated by desperation. He went further than anyone realizes. He made decisions that nearly destroyed her. He crossed a line, and I tried to keep it from you because I felt I could protect you from further sorrow, but I can't anymore." Ridge's forehead wrinkled, his heart racing as if each beat warned him of the impending blow. "Which line, Logan?" he inquired, his voice harsh but shaking beneath, as if he already feared the answer. Brooke took in a big, strained breath. He used her, Ridge. He captured her not just emotionally, but also with his fixation, leaving her with no way out. He took advantage of her trust and fragility, and she bore the consequences alone for months. "She informed me, Ridge. She told me everything, and I've been holding it in, trying to decide whether telling you would break you more than keeping it. But I can't lie anymore. You ought to know that your son's decisions have inflicted scars on her heart that may never heal." The words shattered the quiet like shards of glass. Ridge closed his eyes, his head lowering as if the weight of the confession forced him into the chair. He wanted to refute it, accuse Brooke of exaggeration, but his fatherly instincts told him it was genuine. He had noticed the warning signs, the disquiet in Hope's eyes, and the times when Thomas's passion bordered on dangerous. He had turned aside, choosing faith over fear, and now the truth stood in front of him, unmistakable. Upstairs, Thomas's knees gave way. He collapsed against the wall, hands covering his face as Brooke's words echoed in his ears. Each phrase was like a hammer to his chest, slamming guilt into him until he could not breathe. For so long, he convinced himself that his actions were justified, that they were motivated by love and a desire to start a family. But now, hearing his father's stillness and Brooke's shaky voice, he realized what he had really done. He had not built anything. He'd wrecked it. Brooke's voice cracked as she drew closer, letting out her tears. "I know you love him, Ridge. I know he's your son, and you'll want to believe that he still has excellent qualities. And there is. But what he did, what he took from Hope, cannot be undone. She's forgiven him more than she should have, and each time, he just pushed harder. She's been silently breaking down, and I can't continue to cover for him. I can't keep watching her suffer in silence, just so you don't have to face what he's become." Ridge eventually lifted his head, his eyes gleaming as he battled to hold back tears. His voice was hoarse, like if a man's throat had been burned by anguish. "You're telling me that my son, Thomas, injured her in ways I can't forgive?"